Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at the MORryde RV Cargo Slide Out. And these are fantastic ways to add a lot of storage to the basement of your RV, and there's a ton of different sizes to account for whatever space you may have in your RV, and they all install essentially the same, so I'm going to walk you through how to get yours installed. Now the first thing you need to make sure is obviously getting the right tray for your RV, and that's going to be coming down to taking measurements of your physical space. And this one is a 90 by 39 inch. So to get those measurements, we're measuring from the outside edge of this tray. This is the furthest part, so make sure you have that for sure as far as clearance goes, but also you need to take into account when you close your doors, sometimes you'll have latches and things that may kind of bump in a little bit. So make sure that you have ample space for that. And as far as width goes, you do need to measure from this outside edge. And this is going to be our 39 inches. So that is the absolute minimum that you're going to want. And again, making sure for clearance sake that you do have a straight shot. So as you can see, this door doesn't completely open perpendicular. So making sure that we're not too close to that edge when it's fully extended is going to be key. Now, as far as height goes, this one's coming in at about 6 3/4, give or take. You are going to be loading things in here, so that shouldn't be that important, but something you do need to consider is going to be if you have a lip under here, making sure that it clears. Now, they do have blocks available that are going to space this up a little bit to be able to clear a lip, but from the bottom here, we're looking at about 2.5 inches, maybe a little bit less than that, maybe more so on like 2 1/4. So making sure that this lip is going to be able to clear is also going to be crucial. Now, when bolting your frame in place, this is going to structurally hold the entire assembly in the basement of your RV. There's going to be a few different types of hardware. We have these long screws, and those are going to be the ones that go into the corner here. We also have bolts that you can pass through as well as smaller screws. So it really depends what you're going into. And the way we planned this attack out was making sure that we bolted up to one of the frame rails underneath just for a little bit more structural support. Now, where I bolted into the frame rail, I did a pilot hole first, and then I used my long screws to drill into that frame. I also put a washer right there on the head. So make sure that this is able to bite into that metal. This is going to create a nice structural mounting point. And on the other side, I ended up using the bolts here. And what I did is I drilled this out for the diameter of the bolt, used a washer as well as a washer on the other side before using a nylon lock nut to tighten this all up. The overall installation of the sliding RV cargo tray is super easy to do, so don't let that scare you off because this really is a great resource. That way you're not having to dig through your basement to get your supplies. You're going to be able to slide this out and gain access nice and easy. So speaking of that installation, let's take a look at that so you can get yours installed. Now, before we get anything installed, I recommend having an extra set of hands as this is rather large and we want to test fit it. So with the bands on, we're going to place it in our basement where we're going to be putting our tray just to make sure that everything is going to clear. Now with this in place, eventually we're going to be drilling this into the floor, and ideally you're going to try to find a stud underneath that it can securely attach to. It's just going to make it a little bit stronger overall. So as I feel under here, we have a stud that's right about here. So I'm going to try to get our mounting tabs kind of centered over that, so that way when we drill in, it's going to be on there. Now you're going to want to check all your clearances, so making sure that your doors are able to close properly, also that you have enough clearance for this to slide out. And the best way to check that is take the banding and you can cut this off or pull it off there. And this is going to allow us to extend this and double check all of our clearances. Now don't fully extend this, obviously the whole thing can kind of come with it, but the main thing is we can see with our door fully open, we're able to utilize this spot, still be able to drill into the frame, so we're looking good. Now we're going to need to pull the whole assembly out now that we know we have our clearances and set it somewhere safe to where it's not going to get scratched. So we've just kind of taken our cardboard and unfolded it, that way we have a nice safe place to put it. Now once extended about halfway, the person on the extended side is just going to kind of lift up at an angle, and that's going to get it over those stops. And then we can continue to kind of move this out until we get it slid out. So now you want to take your frame and place it in the basement where you're planning on putting it. And this is where you really want to make sure it's nice and squared up. Now, a frame this big, it can kind of shift. So you want to make sure it's as squared up as possible. So I went ahead and measured here and then on the other side, and I just used a chalk marker to kind of keep my line straight. I then measured from the outside edge just to make sure that it's even on both sides. So having those reference marks, in case it shifts a little bit, it's nice to be able to go back to those if you need to. So at this point, we're going to start making our first drill marks right into this hole underneath the bearing. So double check all your clearances underneath of where any screws are going to be going. You want to make sure that you're obviously not hitting any wiring, plumbing, anything along those lines. Now this side I don't have the frame underneath, so I'm going to do that one first, and then I'm going to need to pilot drill the other one. So we'll just kind of go at an angle here. Be careful not to make contact with your bearing, but we should be able to get this drilled in. So this one's going to go directly into our frame. So I'm going to do a pilot hole with a drill bit. Now something I realized with the other one, as you kind of go at an angle, it's going to kind of push it back just maybe about 1/8 of an inch, but that's something you might want to take into account. So bumping this up 1/8 of an inch to draw it in perfectly might be key. So we'll just go ahead, we'll get this drilled out and drill through the frame rail. Go ahead and run this in. Now we'll just go ahead and repeat on the other side on both corners. Now with the 4 sides already mounted in, we're going to put our tray back in. This is going to give us that nice structure, and we'll be able to get the rest of these mounted up, but this is going to make sure that it's going to slide evenly. So now that we have our tray in place, you're going to want to slide to make sure everything's good, everything's actuating properly, it's not getting hung up. And at this point, we're going to mount up hardware, at least 4 on each side, evenly spaced out. But you can see there's quite a bit of extra hardware here. So on our frame side, I'm going to use the longer screws to bite into that metal. On the non-frame side, it may be tempting to use these, and it'd probably be okay going into the wood to hold it in place, but since this is rated at pretty high weight capacities, I'm going to go and use our heavy-duty bolts here with nylon lock nuts. So I'll be drilling holes through with washers and then bolting it from underneath. So it's kind of up to you, but I figure since we have this hardware, it'll be a little bit more sturdy having those bolts in place. So I went ahead and slid this one way, and that way we can accomplish at least getting 2 of them in place. You can always put more if you want. So there's a number of different holes that you can put them in. I'm just going to work down this frame side, putting some pilot holes and then our longer screws, and then we'll go ahead, we'll drill out for those bolts to get those in place. Now on the rail, you may notice that there's going to be larger diameter holes. Those are going to work really well for our bolts. But for any of the smaller ones, those are where our screws are going to be. So where we have holes that are larger, we're going to run the bolts through there. Just make sure it's even on the other side with that hardware. You'll see that there's a few mounting points up there. So if you need to, you can use the small screws instead of the bolts on this side, just as a little bit added protection. But again, just make sure these are going through those larger diameters. So with our one side mounted up, we'll just slide our tray to the other side and repeat. So now with everything bolted up, everything's secure, all that's left to do is load up all your supplies, put this back in the basement, close up your doors, and hit the road. So no matter what size you end up going with to fit your needs of your RV, it's all going to install about the same. So hopefully this helps you get yours installed.